hope that by now you have a copy of this little booklet, because it's the framework for the things that we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks, or last 2 weeks, this week and next week. And our goal is to, next week, be able to arrive at a place where we're able to say, basically make a covenant before the Lord, which is a declaration, with your help and to the best of our ability, this is what we want to do. And I'm looking at what you got there, guys. It's not working on my clicker. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead without you, but when you get it, let me know. In Revelation, one of the things that we read in chapter 2, I think it's verse 17, he says, let him who has an ear hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And then he explains something that is going to happen. He says, to him who overcomes, I will give him a white rock with a new name on it, a name that only he and I know. And you'd be inclined to say, what? Yeah, actually, when you get to heaven, Jesus is going to give you a rock. And so I brought a rock here with me just to kind of show you. And by the way, I'm reasonably confident that no one can read this rock, but because I wrote it in Hebrew. And maybe somebody can, I don't know. But anyway, that's Yaakov. And I wrote it in Greek in the back, which is Iakobos, which is the name James in Greek and in Hebrew. Now, the name James means supplanter. It's not like MacGyver, it's supplanter. And that is not a happy name to have. You know, there's other names, like Grace. I mean, that's a great name to have. But my name means supplanter, and I think it's actually telling you what I would be if I didn't have Jesus. And I'm glad that God spared us all for that. But that's nonetheless my name. But when I get to heaven, Jesus is going to give to me a different rock. And it is going to have a new name on it. And I can't wait for that to happen. Now, you might say, well, what is this all about? What's going on here, this name thing? And there have been all kinds of interpretations. Lots of Bible students are challenged by this passage. But Isaiah can actually help us out. Here's what Isaiah says in chapter 62. He says, and you will be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will designate. He's talking to Zion, and which is God's people, and he's talking about something that is going to happen in the future. He says, it will no longer be said of you, forsaken, but you will be called, my delight is in her, for the Lord delights in you. Well, I really like that because, Israel was called forsaken, but they're going to be called, my delight is in her. And I was born and given the name supplanter. It also means heel grabber or conniver. Great, okay. Well, anyway, aren't you glad I found Jesus at the age of 6 so we wouldn't have to see what that looks like? So I'm really looking forward to my new name stone. And you're going to get one too. It's a way of saying, and I'm going to just leave this one at the cross, I'm done with old me. I am ready for new me. And I can't wait to see what he gives me that says, yes, Yaakov was who you were, but this is who you are. That's going to happen to you. Is that not going to be fun? So we'd like to get a little taste of this, and so I'll explain more next week. But as you leave the service, stop in, and if you're in the center, there's a place there as well, but stop in the lobby, and there are a bunch of rocks there. Get one that you think is representative of you, write your name on it, and hang on to it, and bring it next week. You're going to use that rock. We're actually going to have not a rock concert, but rock worship. And And you're going to use that rock. So grab one as you go. Find one that you think matches your character. Now, your children can do this too, or you can have a family rock where you all sign it. But it needs to be a rock that is who you are. And next week we're going to do something that relates to our study of healthy relationships that I think you will find, hopefully, a moving experience of worship, but something very different from what you've ever done before. All right, so there's a question. Okay, Jim, you told us, be like Father. Check, got it. Throw grace. Okay, got it. Check. But now I got a question. Under what circumstances do I withhold forgiveness? Because obviously, if I go around forgiving everybody all the time for everything, they're never going to learn anything. Aren't there times when we hang on to grace, where I'm poised to throw it, but I hang on to it? He doesn't deserve this, which is kind of the idea, by the way. He doesn't deserve this. If I just show him grace, he's just going to keep being the same old person. Don't I wait until at least somebody is repentant? Now, that's not a new question. The disciples were asking this precise question. Matthew 18, which Lily read part of it. Matthew 18 is a part of a sermon in which Jesus is saying, here's how my people should be operating. This is who we are. This is how we operate. This is what we're like. And in the course of that, in verses 15 through 20, he talked about going to a brother who's involved in sin. And Peter is kind of doing the math, and he's thinking, okay, hang on here a minute. If I'm hearing Jesus correctly, what he's saying is that as often as somebody repents, I need to forgive him. And is that what I'm supposed to do? Now, let me stop for just a minute and just talk to a certain group of you in the room and help you before we get to the end of the message. For some of you in this room, you have come into the room and there is a weight that you are carrying. It is the weight of a relationship where someone has hurt you. And you're thinking, Jim, how can I possibly forgive that person for what they've done? I have been so severely hurt or wounded. You don't know what, in fact, I'm still dealing with it. You don't know what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. You don't know what this person is putting me through. What I want you to do is put that voice on pause. Just hit the pause button for 30 minutes. And when we get to the end, I am hopeful that you will receive something that will change everything. All right, so Jesus is breaking new ground. He's talking about restoration that is friendly to confrontation. He's talking about how forgiveness and confrontation work together. And Peter is thinking, whoa. What about repeat offenders? The people who keep doing it over and over and over again. Now, in the culture of the time, the religious leaders taught that 3 is the limit. In other words, once somebody goes to offense number 4, you are not obligated to forgive them anymore. They had a couple passages in the Old Testament that they thought said that. They were wrong, but that's what they thought. So Peter kind of doubles it. And he says, Jesus, so how often should I forgive somebody? Up to 7 times? And by the way, he's just, he's being magnanimous. Peter's saying, I'm going to up the ante here a lot. The problem is the mere use of numbers is a flawed system. What Jesus says, and the language actually is 70 times 7, or 490 times. Jesus says, I don't say to you 7 times, but 7 times 70 times. In other words, when somebody repeats an offense 490 times, you're off the hook. Now, remember, that's just a certain type of offense. So here's Paul. I picked on him last week, so I'll do it again this week. So let's say Paul has lied to me. Okay, we're at 453. Okay, very good. But that's just the lying part. Maybe he's slandered me. Oh, man, we're only at 327 on that. I got to keep a list on everybody to see when I get to 491? The implication is obvious. What Jesus is saying is, forget the numbers. This is not about the numbers. Notions of forgiveness based on merit and measuring infractions and counting is foreign to what Jesus wants his servants to experience. He doesn't want us to be all involved in this counting game as it pertains to forgiveness. And then Jesus tells a parable to make the point. The very idea that you count shows that you don't understand something profound that you need to understand. And that's what launches then into this parable. Now, Jesus is going to advocate for unlimited forgiveness. In other words, even when Paul hits 491, even when Paul hits 1001, I forgive. Now, that is not the same as a benign acceptance of sin. If Paul has lied to me 1,000+ times, he's got a problem, and we need to deal with it. But I'm going to start by forgiving to help him become someone different than who he is. We're not to be complacent about holiness. That's not what's going on here. Be like Father, remember, 2 sermons ago, means we do not approve what God hates. And if someone is doing something that God hates, we hate it too. But we don't not forgive them for that. All right. So in this parable, the first thing we observe is vertical forgiveness. Remember, we talked about the right angle movement of grace. We receive grace from God so that we can become stewards and give grace to others, horizontal grace. That's exactly what's going on in this parable. Now, it's a story in which you have a typical master and a household servant. And the servant is called in for a performance audit. He's brought in, and one servant is flagged. Something is not right. Now, nothing about that is unusual. The amount is unusual. If this is, talents of gold, which it's possible, in today's economy, that represents about a $10 billion of gold. If it's silver, it's about $150 million in silver. So there's nothing unusual in this story except the amount of debt this guy has racked up is incredible. So the process, everybody in that culture would be very familiar with what's involved. You liquidate. Basically, he's declaring bankruptcy. You liquidate, which in this case means you sell him and everything he's got to recover what you can, and then the debt is satisfied. Now, when the servant hears this, he says, "Please be patient with me, and I will repay it all." He says, "Give me more time." Now, is that a reasonable request? Let's see by doing a little test here in the room. So if you owed $10 billion, raise your hand if a little more time would make it possible to repay it. I want to, really? Okay, I want to be your best friend. This is so bogus. He is so deluded. No amount of more time is going to help this. Now, you say, well, yeah, but what if it's silver? Okay, 150 million, same test. How many of you could make good on a $150 million debt if you just had a little more time? So this guy's plea was not persuasive. It was not as if the master was going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. No, instead the master says, this guy has gone way around the bend. He doesn't have a clue. But it says, then his master was filled with pity for him. He felt sorry for him. This guy is underwater on a level that nobody can imagine. And I feel sorry for him. And then it says, and he released him and forgave the debt. What? $10 billion. Wrote it off. Was it because his plea was so winning? No. It was a betrayal of his stupidity and the fact that he doesn't even get it. The master wiped clean the slate of this whole sorry business and gave the man a fresh start. The scale of what was forgiven is intended to give us a glimpse of what Father has done for us all. In this parable, the master is actually showing us, giving us a glimpse of Father. And everybody in this room has been forgiven a debt that would be impossible to repay, no matter how much time you have. That's what's being seen. This should have become for this man the single defining moment of his life. I mean, if you're at a backyard barbecue and you come up to him and says, hey, have I told you about what happened to me? I mean, you're not going to believe it. I owed $10 billion. And the master forgave it. And you say, to yourself, I've heard it about 10 times already, but you come back, hey, have I told you about? That's the story that has gripped him. That's what God has done for us. We can't stop talking about it, like what should have been here. The master deserves wholehearted devotion, but instead what he receives from this servant, interestingly, is hard-hearted defiance. If God were counting our offenses, we'd be in such a world of hurt. But here is what is true. In him, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished on us. We have been given incredible wealth. In fact, $10 billion doesn't come close to it. The cost of our redemption is the death of God's own Son. We have been given incredible wealth and riches for no other reason than Father loves us. Now, to forgive means that God is choosing to deny our sin the power to diminish our relationship. Jim, you have sinned. But I am not going to let the fact that you have sinned to in any way diminish my commitment to your true good. That's what he's doing. Now, there may be consequences, but there will be no lessening of his love for us when we sin. That's what it means for him to forgive. True forgiveness, here's a definition of forgiveness. True forgiveness is a grace-based, in other words, it's based on grace, not merit, choice. It's something I choose. I have the power to choose this. To deny an offense, here's something that someone has done, and I am going to deny that something the power to adversely affect my relationship with the offender. This is not going to subtract my love for you or my desire to promote your true good. Now, that kind of forgiveness is actually like a gift, but it's a gift that has to be unwrapped to enjoyed. For example, here at the cross, there is a massive gift. This represents all the things that Father has forgiven you, me. But this gift does you no good unless you come and you unwrap it. It's just like a Christmas present. If it's sitting off in the corner and unwrapped, it doesn't do you any good. You have to unwrap it. That's a part of what happens when you are forgiven. But to enjoy the benefit of the forgiveness, you have to unwrap the present. Well, hang on to that thought. I'm going to say some more about it. All right, so in the parable, we see the vertical forgiveness side. He has forgiven this incredible debt. Now we're going to talk about the horizontal movement of forgiveness. And there's another stunning plot twist. In the first one, we were stunned by the fact he's forgiven this, and now we're going to see something that is kind of a what? Although the amount was trifling by comparison, he was owed a debt that represented a few weeks of labor. And the plea by this servant that he met as he left the master was the exact same plea. It's the same words in the original. He says, "Give me more time and I will repay." So the servant who owed him a few days' labor came to the guy who had just been forgiven $10 billion worth and says, "If you just give me some more time, I can do this." And the steward said, "Not happening. Bro, you're going to prison." And he tortured him. Now, by doing that, what this steward was saying is, I prefer to live in a world where people get what they deserve. He had just been shown incredible grace. He didn't get what he deserved. But when he met this fellow servant, what he was saying is, I want to live in a world where people get what's coming to them. Now, here, let's take a little quiz, all right? How many of you believe that is a smart preference? How many of you believe that is a stupid preference? The stupids have it. Couldn't be more dumb what he's doing. Why? If you prefer to live in a world where you get what's coming to you, what are you going to get? What's coming to you? A is God's forgiveness, B is our forgiveness of one another, and B follows A. That's what Jesus is saying. Although the amount was trifling by comparison, the unforgiving steward assigned another with an identical plea to debtor's prison. And the steward thereby made a startling declaration. He said, "The master has given me an incredible gift, but I don't think that's really that valuable. I prefer to live in a world where you get what's coming to you." And in so doing, he's saying, I despise that gift. If someone has received God's unlimited forgiveness, they are actually empowered to impart forgiveness to someone else. If you have received A, you can give B. You actually have that power. If you have taken that gift and unwrapped it, you have the power to give forgiveness to others and to give unlimited forgiveness. Now, let me tell you two implications of what I've just said. If you cannot forgive someone else, you are telling us you've never received A. You've never unwrapped the package. Someone who says, I refuse to forgive this person. I mean, this is the 10th time they've done the same thing, and I am in so much pain, and every time I see them, I am in so much pain. I refuse to forgive them. To refuse to do B is to raise a big question mark. Have you ever experienced A? Because those who have experienced A can do B. By your liberal use of forgiveness, you actually declare your identity. You tell us who you are. I forgive because I am forgiven. That's actually my new identity rock. Remember I showed it to you at the beginning? I'm forgiven. This is who I am. I've opened the gift. 60 years ago, I opened that incredible gift for the first time. And on the flip side of my rock, it says forgiver, because this too is who I am. I have been forgiven, which is what makes it possible for me to be a forgiver. The forgiven forgive, and those who can't or won't forgive betray the fact that they have not been forgiven. Jesus explicitly identifies the connection between the story and life. Here's what he says at the very end. My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart. That's pretty sobering, isn't it? If you cannot or will not forgive someone else, you're basically saying, Father, I prefer to live in a world where people get what's coming to them. And you already told me that is stupid to the max. The receipt of vertical forgiveness actually empowers you to be able to extend horizontal forgiveness to somebody else. If you have unwrapped this package, you actually have the capacity to give forgiveness to other people. Now, this to me is mind-boggling because the world does not have this capacity. If you have not opened that box and received the forgiveness from God, you do not have the ability to genuinely, freely, fully forgive someone else. You can maybe say, I accept your apology, but you do not have the power to be able to, on the basis of grace, choose to deny that sin the power to adversely affect your relationship. The forgiven man asks, if God has freely forgiven me such an impossibly large debt, how can I deny my brother forgiveness in all other matters which are so comparatively insignificant? I mean, when you look at all that God has forgiven me, whatever Paul has done, it's nothing by comparison. It can't come close. So I freely, fully forgive just as I've been forgiven. So let me clarify a few things, okay? If you're getting that, there are probably a few questions that are coming to your mind. Okay. Does that mean that I forgive the unrepentant and oblivious? You are empowered to forgive the unrepentant, the oblivious, the person who just keeps doing the wrong thing. You have been given that. Now, this is not a denial of consequences. When someone keeps sinning, there will be consequences. But you have the capacity to be able to forgive them. You're not, by forgiving someone, you're not denying what happened. You're not pretending, oh, he just did this or said this, but that really didn't happen. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're just choosing, as a grace-based choice, to deny that sin the power to adversely affect your relationship. So what I'm going to do is give you a picture that I think will help you to understand how this works, okay? So did you notice what Jesus said in the parable? He said at the very end, so will my heavenly Father do to you if each of you does not forgive your brother from the heart. So the giving of forgiveness is something that first occurs in the heart. So let me explain then and give you kind of a visual image of how this works. So let's say in the case of Paul, once again, that he has lied to me. But he hasn't come to me and he hasn't confessed it and he hasn't said, Jim, will you forgive me for lying to you? But whether he comes to me or not, I can go ahead and wrap up a gift, forgiveness for what he has done, and I can put it on the shelf in my heart. Now, if Paul comes to me and says, Jim, will you forgive me? Then I can, quote, communicate forgiveness. And I can give him the gift and I can say, yes, in fact, I have forgiven you, but I want you to know I forgive you for what you have done. You can't give someone a gift that hasn't been put on the shelf in your heart, or you're going to have to figure out, all right, will you forgive me? Okay, hang on a minute while you work that out. Now, that's exactly what Jesus has done, right? What is the heart of God? It's here at the cross. And here at the cross, there is a gift, which is full and free forgiveness for everything you've done and everything you will do. And it's right here. But it doesn't do you any good unless you come and you receive it and unwrap it. The same is true for what's on the shelf of my heart. I have some gifts on the shelf of my heart that have been there for 20 years. There is someone in my life, no one I'm married to or children or whatever, just so you know, but there is someone that I have had a relationship with for 20 years who I think views it as his personal mission in life to, every time we get together, explain to Jim what's wrong with him. And he has never, in 20 years, come to me and said, Jim, would you forgive me for ABC? But I have a gift with his name on it on the shelf in my heart. In light of all that God has forgiven me, I have chosen to forgive him. And at such time as he comes, if he does, and asks for forgiveness, I can give him that gift and say, here you go. So what Jesus is describing in this parable is he's saying, in light of what you have been forgiven, fully, freely forgive everyone who has done something against you. Put the gift on the shelf in your heart. And at such time as they might come to you, they may never come to you this side of heaven. But at such time as they come to you and say, Jim, I was wrong by what I did. Will you forgive me? Then I'm able to say, absolutely, I forgive you. And I can give them that gift and he can enjoy it. Some gifts in here are pretty costly because someone has hurt you so greatly. Now, what I'm going to explain to you is that if you don't put that gift on the shelf in your heart, it is going to work your great harm. So anyway, let me show you a couple things about this process we're describing. So the first thing someone would say is, well, Jim, aren't some relationships beyond saving through forgiveness? I mean, aren't some relationships so far gone, so bad, that no amount of this forgiveness stuff is going to be able to help them? And my answer would be, if that's true, then we're all lost. Because we have all done the max. We have all done as much as you could possibly do to destroy a relationship. And yet, look what God has done. He's made it possible for us to have a relationship with him. So I know that there is no sin so great, no number of sins so accumulated that they can get in the way of the power of forgiveness to be able to render them neutral in the effect on a relationship. For example, imagine a young boy whose mom remarries and his stepdad is abusive. And this boy is living with this abusive relationship. And he is so mad at his mom for what she has done, exposing him to this relationship. And you might be inclined to say, there is no way that that relationship can be put back together. Well, let's see.
I don't really remember my parents being together. I remember when my mom brought my stepdad into our life, that this guy was trouble. And I remember the police coming to our home, whatever home we lived at. The police at some point were always showing up there, and because there was some kind of abuse or some kind of struggle. So, as we got older, we kind of started having a mind of our own, and I remember getting to the point where, like, I don't have to do this anymore. You know, I'm not sure that I want to have a relationship with my mom because she doesn't take care of me and she doesn't protect me. So maybe I should start taking care of myself. And then I went to Bible college, and my first class was, intro to the Old Testament. Of course, you get to Exodus 20 and the 10 Commandments, and one of the first commandments is to honor your mother and father. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, surely, if your parents really dropped the ball, you don't have to honor them. And as I'm thinking that, the professor says, and even if your parents didn't do a great job, you still have to honor your parents. And I was like, oh no. Because I remember my last conversation with my mom, and it had nothing to do with honoring her. When I called my mom, and I just, said, hey, I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, and I want to have a good relationship with you. And I think that was sort of the beginning of change. I never thought that we would get to this point. And I guess I just assumed that the relationship would always be broken, and that, my mom, would never be a mom to me. And now, I can drink coffee with my mom every morning and hang out and talk about God and talk about what God's doing in our lives.
And I'm so grateful that we have that relationship. And it has to do with God, me having God come into my life and my heart.
My mom said she's always saying sorry and asking forgiveness. And, for me, I'm like, you don't even need to ask forgiveness anymore because I've already forgiven. But I know it's important for my mom to hear from me that I still love her and that I truly have forgiven her. And I think that sums up God's grace. God can take the ugliest and the most terrible situation, and He can restore it, He can redeem it. If He can redeem my relationship with my mom, I have faith that He can restore any relationship.
Grace did that. Forgiveness does that. There is no mess so big that sin creates that forgiveness and grace can't not just neutralize it, but fix it. That's the power of forgiveness. Okay, do I need to forgive someone who hasn't asked for forgiveness? Do I really need to forgive my dad, who has never humbled himself, my mom, my spouse, the friend? When we forgive others, especially when it's costly forgiveness, that does affirm our identity. We belong to Jesus. And when we forgive by putting a gift on the shelf, there's actually something it does for the giver that I want to help you understand, all right? A failure to forgive, even if I don't forgive someone who hasn't asked for it, actually creates a self-induced hurt that is going to work against me. Now, to help you understand this, I'm going to talk a little bit about Louis Zamperini. He's the one that the movie Unbroken was about. And I've watched the movie. It's pretty rough. I'm not sure that it's the right one for you to watch, but I read the book as well. The movie is worth renting so that you can get the 5-minute bonus feature that describes what happened after the movie. That is so worth your watching. But just for you to be aware, Louis was an Olympic athlete who served in World War II. He was captured by the Japanese, taken to an internment camp where he was tortured, where the leader of the camp, who they nicknamed the Bird because of his appearance, he figured out who Louis was and took it upon himself to personally break this man. And Unbroken, the title of the movie, is really about his decision, I am not going to let him break me. So eventually, when he came, when the Allies won, then Louis was brought back to the U.S. He was released from that camp. But he was still in bondage to the bird. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to do whatever he could to get his vengeance on him. And it destroyed his life. He started drinking alcohol. He became an alcoholic. It destroyed his marriage. He actually woke up one night and he was strangling his wife because he thought she was the bird. I love this quote from Laura Hildebrand, who wrote the book. And she said this, which I think is so helpful. The paradox of vengefulness is that it makes men dependent upon those who have harmed them, believing that their release from pain will come only when they make their tormentors suffer. In seeking the bird's death to free himself, Louis had chained himself once again to his tyrant. During the war, the bird had been unwilling to let go of Louis. After the war, Louis was unable to let go of the bird. And so even though he was free, he was still in bondage to this person who he was fixated on. Whatever it takes, I want to get back at him. Now, one of the things that happened in Louis' life was he went to a Billy Graham crusade. And he was placating. Some people said, you ought to come to this. So he came, he stayed. They were getting to the just as I am thing. And he got up and started to walk out. And as he was walking out, God met him. And in that moment, he realized, he basically what happened is he opened this box. And in that moment, he forgave the bird. At that moment, Laura says, something shifted sweetly inside him. It was forgiveness, beautiful and effortless and complete. For Louis Zamperini, the war was over. See what happened? Louis, he opened this, received the power to do this, and basically put it right there. Now, if he could get it in. And he eventually went to Japan, found the bird, and told him, I forgive you for what you have done. And then he went and he found all the others and did the same. But what's so powerful is that at the moment in which he forgave, and in the moment in which he forgave the bird, that's when he was released. Which is why my desire this evening is to plead with you. There are some in this room, you are in bondage to someone who has done wrong by you, and you've struggled with forgiving them. Sometimes you even put the gift there, but then something else happens and you pull it back out. When you put that gift on the shelf of your heart, you are free from bondage to the one who has hurt you. If they someday repent, great. If they confess their sin, you can give them the gift that's been waiting on the shelf. But you can be free now by choosing to forgive that person. Have you received the lavish gift of God's forgiveness? Then you can put the gift on the shelf of your heart. So I have two questions for you in this room. First off would be, your freedom awaits. If you have never opened this gift, if you have never come to the cross and said, I want to receive the gift that has my name on it right there. In a minute, I'm going to pray, and after I do, you can come to that cross, and there will be some elders or pastors there, and you can open this box, not this particular one, the real one, And you can actually receive the forgiveness that is full and free and goes beyond $10 billion, and it's yours. And then there may be some in this room where you know, even as I've been talking, the face of that someone, you've been seeing that face. And maybe you've put a gift in the shelf of your heart, but you've taken it back out. Maybe you've never put it in there. You can be free from whatever this person has done by putting the gift in the shelf and saying, in light of all that God has forgiven me, I choose to deny this person's sin the power to adversely affect my relationship with them. This is who I am. Forgiven who forgive. Let's pray.